Hello, everyone. Well, it's that time of the year again. Analysts publish predictions, not because forecasting is a sport, but because in the enterprise AI marketplace, the innovation cycles are now moving faster than any technology wave that has preceded it. Models, platforms, agentic architectures are literally iterating in months, not years, and the implications for leaders is blunt. If you fall behind, you may never catch up to the competitors who are compounding learning and data advantage and trust and governance efforts with operating muscle every quarter. Welcome to the next frontiers of AI. I'm Scott Hebner, Principal Analyst for AI and CMO Advisor at theCUBE Research. And today we'll share 4 predictions for 2026 in the enterprise AI market. 2 from me and 2 from my great colleague at theCUBE Research, Christophe Bertrand. Christophe is our Principal Analyst for Cyber Resiliency and Data Protection and a bunch of other things actually. And he brings a critical lens on what will separate AI leaders from AI liabilities. So we wanted to make sure that our predictions this year include what I think is going to be critical is achieving trust and governance in AI. So let me bring up Christophe here. How are you doing, Christophe?
Good. Hi, Scott. Hello, everyone.
It's good to see you again. You've been a busy guy, right? We got the summit we're working on. We got tons of things going on in the survey space and research. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to recently.
Yeah, we're working on a great AI Trust and Cyber Resiliency Summit, which will also lead to some additional research. So that's coming up later in this quarter. And, we've done these before, but now we're combining forces. And more importantly, I think there is going to be, and without getting too much into predictions yet, in 2026, I think it's a big year. It's the year of maybe the year of reckoning for AI in many ways, both on the data side, the infrastructure side, the agentic side. So lots going on.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about this a lot. We did, actually one of the more popular podcasts that I have done has been the one with you. I think it was several months ago, maybe a little bit more than that, on data and AI governance. And I think that is the defining, if there was one word that defines the state of enterprise AI right now, I would say it's the word trust, which gets you into cyber resiliency and data quality and data compliance, and then the AI models and explainability. It just is a tree of challenges. And if anything is slowing down adoption, it's not the capabilities. It's not even really the skill set anymore. It's trust. So yeah, the summit is going to be all about that. And everyone will hear more about that shortly as soon as we get it lined up with the date and everything. All right, Christophe. So let me start, if you don't mind, before we get into our predictions for 2026. Let me go back in time and just take a quick look at the predictions that I made last year, actually last January. And Christophe, I want to get your take on this. And just so you all know, I took the document, the research report from last year. I went to Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT and said, rank this or rate it. And I took the averages. Obviously the AI models want you to love them. So they are probably a little bit more glowing than perhaps a real grader would give. But I think they're directionally in the right direction. So the first one was the Gen AI wars will meet the same fate as the browser wars. If you remember, for those of you who were around 30 odd years ago, the most important decision you can ever make for your business was what browser you selected. And in reality, it was just a gateway into the world of the internet. And it was how you built around it that the value was there, right? And I think what we're going to see with Gen AI, and the prediction was it's going to meet the same fate. And basically it's going to standardize out, and then it's going to be at best, a preference of which one you adopt. You probably support all of them, right? And I think that's actually happening. And that's why the models probably gave me an A. And if you look at the differentiation among the models from a performance perspective, it has gone dramatically down. From the 10th to the top one is only 12% difference. And if you look at the top couple models, it went from 5% gap to under 1%. Performance being not just speed, but being, their capabilities and all that. So they really are commoditizing out, and they represent an underlying infrastructure, and an absolutely critical part of it but it's going to be the value that's built around it. And that kind of gets us to the second one here about LLMs run out of gas. I think we're all familiar with, the 95% that failed to have production AI from MIT. It's probably a little bit exaggerated, but clearly a vast majority are running into production problems. And it's because of the trust issue, right? Our own Agentic AI Futures Index said only 49% had a high degree of trust in their outcomes of generative AI. So I think that's starting to happen too. The AI reasoning one is interesting. I would probably give it a B- at best. I do think that's starting to happen now. There's been a 320x increase in the use of reasoning models, largely probably around chain of thought, which is questionable reasoning. But I think we're going to start to see more and more that get integrated in. And you can see that 54% say reasoning is going to accelerate the LLM adoption over time. Explainability becoming big. Compliance, right? Policy adherence. Do you trust what it's saying? If it can't explain it to you, you can't trust it. You can see some of the stats here, pretty big numbers about the importance of getting better explainability and auditability and verification out of the model. So that's starting to happen. And then from a talent perspective, more and more of the software developers are becoming data scientists because they're using AI models, and the AI models and the AI engineering is fusing with software development. And then clearly the technical, augmentation of AI talent with agents is starting to happen too. So overall, not bad, but curious, Christophe, to what your thoughts are on all that.
A couple of things. The first point being that I think this year what we've seen is clearly people complaining about a lack of ROI, which ties into pretty much all of the points you've highlighted. Those are all the symptoms, and there are others around data that we could double click on. So I think that's my first statement. When you combine that to the bigger question, which is, does this make sense for the business? Well, unless you have this level of trust in the infrastructure, in the data, everything you're going to be, and I think you've put it in so many words, is going to be all about, it's going to be, everything's going to be a question, every decision's going to be negotiated instead of being a system. So there's a question of scale that comes in, and all of that you've identified here also points to the fact that maybe if all of these dimensions were met, you would be able to get to scale. The other point is the skill set. I find it interesting that there's a lot of focus on coding right now. It's not surprising. Actually, it is probably very normal. However, the real decision will be, how do you make it, when you think about AI, how do you make that a cognitive system for your company, for your organization, whatever it is you do? And the code becomes almost not as important as the logic and workflows that go behind that, and which is also where we get into this question of trust. Can you trust the system to understand what's happening, to make the right decisions based on the data that it has, and is the data to be trusted to begin with? And this is why I think the biggest discussion around right now, we're still pretty much in the weeds of technology, whereas the big conversation is more one of, cognitive systems and data trust being combined to provide that ability to develop, to push agentic AI at scale. I know it's a lot of different dimensions, but I'm trying to triangulate this because I think there are some prerequisites out there around cyber resiliency, for example, that are absolutely non-negotiables.
Yeah. If I was to net it out and I was to take out the two on software development, which our colleague Paul Nashawati is going to have predictions for 2026 around that. If I was just to look at the first four, I basically I think what it's saying is that LLM only architectures are only going to get you so far because they create a liability trap because they're not able to really explain how they've come up with decisions and outcomes. And they have a history of not being perfectly reliable, right? They're good for fluency and coherence and conversation. It's going to be those that build around that, right, as a foundational architecture. So LLM architectures are going to die. It's going to be LLM plus other parts of the architecture that's going to be the winner. And that's when you're going to be able to get things like true explainability. You're going to be able to deal with cyber resiliency. And so I think it was the right direction, a little premature in terms of the market movement would be how I would assess it. So, all right, well, let's get into 2026. We'll start with you. We each get 2 predictions. You get to go first, Christophe. Shoot.
All right. Okay. Well, first of all, I think, as I said, I gave you one of them already, which is cyber resiliency is going to be a prerequisite, in my opinion, for AI deployments at scale. And that's only going to be closely matched by or intertwined with the need for data governance, which really ties into AI trust issues. And the reality is a lot of organizations, or research has demonstrated that are struggling today with implementation challenges. Those are non-negligible. I mean, as a matter of fact, if I look at our research, we did 2 major pieces of research last year, one on data protection and AI and one on cyber resiliency. But in terms of AI implementation, the number one challenge is high costs, so quickly followed by cybersecurity, cyber exposures, and difficulty in integrating with existing systems and processes. I mean, right there, the top 3 is like, okay, tall orders, right? So yeah. One of my predictions is that you can, obviously the cost piece, I get it, is a challenge that gets resolved over time with maturity. But secondly, the second one, cybersecurity, makes it a prerequisite. So cyber resiliency, first prediction becomes or is in 2026 with data governance. And I don't know which one will win. Those 2 are going to be the absolute key to being able to do anything else. Now, some organizations, and we've talked to some of them as part of our summit, have done really well in some with some processes because they have controlled their governance up front. They have a lot of experience. They understand compliance really well. Sometimes it's actually their core business. The use cases are reasonably manageable, that it can derive a lot of benefit from implementing AI and successfully doing so. But across the board, you still have to have a resilient infrastructure. So I think that's really and strong governance. So kind of 1 and 2 here, or 2 in 1, if you will, for my first prediction.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. Again, goes back to that trust issue being the overriding, and you peel that back a little bit. And the best AI capabilities are going to be those that can actually use the data, and the data being quality. And the more data you use, the more you're at risk, and the more you need cybersecurity, you need the resiliency, everything that comes along with it. So I think you're right. As enterprises start to deploy those fundamental enterprise guardrails, it's do or do not do kind of proposition. So I think that's being forced to the forefront. If you're just using these LLMs to do, summarize reports and do a little bit of research and, maybe automate a thing here or there, that's one thing. But if you're really going to start to exploit AI, that's going to exploit your data. Yeah, I think you're right. Right. It's a big difference.
Yeah, and I will tell you something else. I mean, from our research, we saw that, first of all, organizations, are exposed. And that's kind of one of maybe another prediction. Cyber criminals here will intensify their attacks on the AI infrastructure. And we know those are already happening. Our research shows that. Actually, I wrote a blog about this, I think this week, so it should be published. So, and it shows you all of the ways that models can be polluted, attacked, data can be tweaked, so the results are not reliable or even possible. So data security is a major concern, major security concern, major concern in general, primary vulnerability. And here's the twist: only 10% of organizations today report that they're actually backing up their AI infrastructure. So it feels like it's almost like the forgotten child, and that happens often with new workloads. Backup and recovery is a secondary thought, because people don't get up in the morning thinking about it until it's too late. So I think we're going to see some interesting things this year. I predict a spectacular or 2 events where people will have major AI data loss or AI data-related recovery issues affecting their business. And I think we'll hear about them. And there are plenty we don't hear about, I'm sure, but there will be some. It's unfortunate, but that's almost the way of the world these days, between cyber attackers and organizations not being quite ready for prime time.
Yep. And the things you can't predict are going to happen ahead of you. So, All right. Well, let's jump to one of mine. I have two. One's more technology oriented, and the second that we'll get to a little bit later is going to be more of a business oriented, a brand oriented prediction. So let me start with the technology one, which kind of builds on last year's stuff. So my prediction, and I'll quantify my prediction in a second here, is that agentic decision intelligence totally reshapes enterprise AI architectures. So in 2026, I think the winners will be those that shift, as I said before, from an LLM only agentic architecture to infuse decision grade, agent systems that are going to be built on a layered architecture. So the LLM plus RAG plus chain of thought layer, so that's LLM layer, is really for fluency and coherence, right? People are beginning to build out a semantic layer that creates meaning and context around your business data and your business operations. And then a causal decision intelligence layer that is for interactive decision analysis. What if, counterfactuals, defensibility, true explainability, right? It's going to be this three-layered architecture that's then going to allow the agents to be the action element of that architecture. So I think enterprises will increasingly demand these type of systems, and then the next wave of ROI is going to depend on that, in addition to what you were talking about, Christophe, which is all the security and cyber resiliency. And I think that's going to happen because these decisions have to hold up under real enterprise scrutiny, compliance, policy, legal issues, all those things come in. And I think that's what's really going to happen here, right? I should also point out there's been a wave, as I've talked about in a previous podcast, of really great research studies by Carnegie Mellon, Oxford, Johns Hopkins, MIT, Northwestern, just to name a few of them, that really do show that these LLMs can misrepresent their underlying reasoning. In fact, Johns Hopkins went as far as to say that LLMs are actually sort of lying to you because they're fabricating the explanation after the fact to justify it versus really knowing what really happened, right? So, I don't think it's necessarily a model quality issue. It's more about if the explanation is unfaithful, the audit trail becomes unfaithful, right? And the system's not defensible. If it's not defensible, it's not going to, make it in the enterprise. So my prediction is that you'll see semantic layers being added. Today, the estimate is about 5 to 10% of enterprises globally have a semantic layer under their agents. I think that will at least double in 2026. And in terms of the cause and effect mechanisms, it's really around 3% today overall. I think that's going to triple. I think you're going to hit double digits, and I think that's going to pick up over time here because in the end, people want to make decisions, and that's really what's the most important part of doing agents that are going to work in a knowledge sort of worker context, and not just automate things, but help people make decisions, consequential decisions, plan, all that kind of stuff. So I just think this layer architecture will start to build out and they'll move beyond RAG and chain of thought and LLMs as the only underpinning part. What do you think?
Right. And that's what I was suggesting about this idea that it's not just, coding for LLMs or things like that. It's really the cognitive components, the cognitive systems, how you can justify the results. And then, more importantly, demonstrate the path that was taken in order to get to a certain outcome, and based on what data you used. Which brings me back. So now we were at the sort of the right side of the model, where now you have agents making decisions and literally acting as your quasi-employee or as your employee. Well, hang on. I think actually we still have a lack of maturity around mentioned cyber resilience for sure. Cyber resiliency is an issue, but I think it's really data governance also that's going to be in compliance. So there has been a renewed interest over the past few years on compliance, sometimes because there was no choice, like because of regulations. There are more and more regulations, but a lot of organizations have realized that their data management is out of whack, that they don't know what they have, where it is, and they certainly can't manage it from a compliance standpoint, which in and of itself is a big issue. Secondly, well, it turns out all of that data, just for compliance, actually has to be, essentially, most of it has to be leveraged or can be leveraged or should be leveraged by AI models, whatever they are, whether it's for, RAG or LLMs or anything you want to do with it, you can't just use data just because. It has to be usable, meaning it has to be clean, it has to be trusted, it has to be resilient, and it has to be compliant. So I expect 2026 to be the year also of compliance and governance before we and maybe a renewal of storage data management and data management practices, because that's absolutely necessary. So we're talking data classification, indexing, things like that. And by the way, a lot of that data is in SaaS environments, begging other questions around how do you get that data back? How do you own it, control it, manage it? I mean, do you expect the vendors to do that for you? And then you wanted like maybe 2 predictions here, and that's going to be my last one. All of this, what I've said, cyber resiliency, data governance, lack of challenges, lack of maturity, cyber risks, lack of backups, and the initial, we've seen some initial attacks on the actual AI infrastructure itself. All of this, I think, leads to some significant activity on the vendor side. I expect to see some significant M&A activity as the market lines continue blurring between storage, data security, data recovery, backup recovery, data governance. And those are broad strokes, but generally I think these markets are starting to combine in very interesting ways. And I think in turn, this is going to create more market confusion for the end users, candidly, because think about it, where do you place your chips? Which ecosystem do you start trusting? It's hard enough with just in cyber, just trying to get cyber to work or just trying to get data management to work. Now you got to make all of these things work together as you're under pressure to develop and produce some reasonably automated AI results or agentic AI solutions. So this is going to be an interesting year. I hope it's not a year of confusion or of more confusion for end users, but it certainly has the potential to be.
Yeah, and I should also point out, you have a lot of data from your surveys that support your confidence level on these, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we know a lot about governance and AI and governance, same with data protection. Looking at both sides of the coin, we know a lot about cyber resiliency, what people have told us and users have told us. So it's an interesting time. Clearly, a lot of signs. There are some encouraging signs, no doubt. But I think at the same time, you also look at the massive questions happening now around ROI and costs associated with just building the hardware infrastructure, the compute, the data centers, and all of that. Okay, maybe it's time to take a little breather and get a few things done right, and then go from there as a beachhead and go land on the next one and the next one. And it feels like to be able to do that at scale, you still need to go back to the basics, which you haven't really achieved it yet. Cyber resiliency, data management, and then governance in general terms, not only the data, but also to your point, now as you implement AI across all the layers that demonstrate the traceability, auditability. And I mentioned compliance, I was talking data compliance, but of course, what you mentioned was AI compliance itself, which is another layer that's starting to happen. Regulations are already coming out. So everybody's going to be affected by that.
Yeah, just because the model told me to do it is not an audit trail. Exactly. It's not a compliance mandate, right? You have to have the explainability. Well, yeah, and I think that's what's good about what we've been doing of late is a lot of these surveys. And if I just go back to the one on the AI decision intelligence, this is one of the questions from our recent Agentic AI Futures Index survey. Organizations' plans for the next 18 months around Agentic AI. And you can see here, those are some pretty good aspirations. Knowledge graphs are at 44%, causal is at 33%. Human in the loop, which is really about interventions and being able to collaborate with the model on making decisions. So the aspirations are there. And, if we were to double the knowledge graph, if it's 5 to 10% now, probably maybe 15%, 20% if you're looking at enterprises above $1 billion. That's all going to double, and it won't quite get you to these numbers, but it'll get you close. So we'll see. We'll do this again next year at this time, and we'll assess, Christophe, how we did. All right, I got one more, and then we kind of do some summary stuff and wrap this up. And this one is more of a business oriented. This is more targeted, not necessarily at technologists, but at maybe a CEO, a chief revenue officer, a CMO, the communications team, which is this notion that that brands are going to go invisible. So I'm predicting by the end of 2026, half of B2B brands will become functionally invisible, especially in the early stage buyer journeys, because the buying journeys are shifting from click-based search kind of things, SEO, to zero-click AI mediated dialogues. They're getting to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Grok or Perplexity, and that's where they're conducting their research and shortlisting vendors and all that. And it's not that SEO dies, right? It just becomes insufficient because the AI models are changing everything. It's not about getting ranked, and it's not about getting backlinks. That's not how it works, right? And this is a real hard reset for how marketing and communications leaders need to think about brand equity and visibility. Because historically, many brands could rely on their own channels, right? Their own websites and their channels that they own to carry the narrative, right? Websites, blogs, webinars, a steady cadence of product messaging, proof points, all that kind of stuff, putting press releases on their site. But that's only going to get you so far because the models need to actually learn more about who you are, understand you, and understand why you matter. They have to believe that you're relevant. They have to be able to cite your content in the moment of a question, and they have to validate you to be credible, to be authentic, to be authoritative, and to be trusted. So it's going to change. It's going to change the game here pretty significantly. And if vendors don't and customers overall don't start to really focus on this, they're going to become invisible. Because if any of you have ever asked to make a recommendation in one of these engines, you'll see there's a short list of 3 to 5 that they provide back. Are you going to be one of those?
Yeah, and I think the biggest question is, are you going to be one of those? And that's going to be predicated upon, number one, the type of prompt that people use. SEO and prompting, I would argue, okay, common thread here. You used to have to provide a bunch of, I remember, our SEO people would tell us, okay, give me a number of keywords and we're going to figure that out, and buy ads and do this and do that. Okay, sponsor words. Okay, different world now, because now you're asking a question to a system that has to then provide you with an answer, and they decide what's important to them. And of course, the type of prompts will matter. So there's a similarity here. You have to figure out the right type of prompts. But more importantly, even if you were able to sort of show up when the prompt is generated, you only show up if you have the right type of content, which is not going to be just white papers. It's going to be your website. It's going to be white paper. It's going to be a lot of video content. And then all of it has to your point, meet a bunch of other requirements. And each model is going to be a bit different. So in other words, if you look at today, content teams, I'm going to argue product marketing teams to a large extent, and certainly digital teams, being in the middle of it all, probably are ill-prepared because they've been designed for SEO, and now it's AEO. It's really, I look at myself, I do a search for this, that, and the other, and I turn on the AI mode. It's nice. It summarizes it for me. I don't necessarily go link by link by link, and if it says sponsored, I probably won't look at it anyway. So even this idea of natural results, natural search, etc., all of that is going away. It's just so interesting. Now, this being said, there's probably light at the end of the tunnel. There are ways to get a better sense for what works, and it's going to be authentic content. It's going to be and I think at the top of funnel is key. You mentioned that. Are you even going to show up? Are you going to be aware? Is your brand going to show some level of awareness in the market? I question what happens if you miss that with the middle of funnel. What do you do there in the middle of funnel? Because that's where the deals happen or don't. People do research on their own. They don't need you. They don't. And now they don't even do it on their own by looking at SEO results based on their search. Now it's AI doing that research for them. Please give me the top 5 XYZ technology for my industry.
Yep.
How do you guarantee that you show up?
Yep. And the
Anyway, fantastic time. Yeah.
yeah, the difference is going to become that your website is going to be an asset in the buying journey towards the end of the buying journey when they want to dig deeper. It is the way to make it an asset in the AI world is to make it, traditionally people build websites for human beings. You got to now build them for actual AI bots that crawl out there. Because that's only one part of the entire influence chain, right? And you are really at risk of being left out in that front end of the buy-in journey and being shortlisted. And actually, let me give you an example. Let's quickly talk through this. Hopefully you can see the actual details on this chart. Because Christophe, as you know, we have one of our offerings is the AEO Advantage Index, real comprehensive diagnostic approach to what these models, and all 5 of them that, the top 5, what they really think about you and how often you get surfaced, right? And it does all the diagnostics, which then allow you to be able to take the right action. So it's more than just measuring. A lot of vendors out there in this space just measure what is happening. They're not telling you why it's happening. So in this this is a real example from a real client of ours. You can see their visibility rate at 38% is not too bad. The secret there is that it's because their name, if someone was to ask about them, they would show up. Citation rate basically means not only do you show up, but there's a URL or there's content provided as evidence that further supports your company. But notice on the left-hand side here, the discovery rate, which basically means category first prompts that do not mention any vendors, like the one you suggested earlier, Christophe, right? What vendors do X, Y, and Z, 0%. Recommendation rate, 0%. So that begs the question, why? And more importantly, once I understand why, how do I go about fixing it? And what you're seeing on the right-hand side, and it's complex, but there's 19 attributes in this AEO chain, most of which are off domain. They're not on your own channels. So what this is really saying, if you look across them at a very high level, is that their website is very citable, well-structured. The mechanics of it are good. It has the schemas. So AI crawlers know how to get to the content that you have, understand it, and cite it, right? The relevance is pretty good at 58 out of 100. And the semantic understanding of what they do, why they matter, is pretty good at 52. So why are they not being cited or not being recommended or discovered? On the right-hand side, you see it's 35 validation. So that's where you get into, are you a credible provider? Are you authentic? Are you authoritative in your topic, right? Can you be trusted? And that's where this particular company is failing. And that is almost 100% outside of your own channels. Those are non-owned channels. It's the reinforcement of a third-party ecosystem that ultimately decides whether your brand or your product or your experts get surfaced. So it's not as easy as just fixing your website. And it's really, Christophe, a combination right now of an art and a science. People are still trying to figure out how all this stuff works. And then they're able to provide the science of how to tune it, if you will. But hope people don't fall prey to an SEO model that they just have to do a great job on their websites. It's only going to get them so far. And that's why I think half these companies at least are going to go somewhat invisible in the beginning of the buying journey. It's really going to change a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. Now you have to cater to this, essentially to the models, not just individuals. So the design of a website is almost like two-tiered, which of course has a number of other implications on the content you need to deliver. If you were used to delivering marketing talk, which a lot of companies are, well, that may not do it anymore. You may have to go do a little more homework for your content to be picked up in a way that is acceptable to the model. And by the way, I said the model, there are 5 or 6 of them right now, yeah. Search engines or whatever you want to call them that really matter. And there may be more in the future. So interesting times.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess we're running out of time here. We can talk all day on this stuff. And that's our 2026 enterprise AI predictions. And I think we've grounded them in what we got right in the past, what we got wrong, and what the market is signaling now, especially through all the surveys and stuff that we've been doing. So if you're leading an AI or data security, cyber resiliency, or any kind of digital transformation, I think the takeaway is quite simple. Treat this cycle in 2026 as a compounding advantage. this is going to be a big year that's going to make a lot of difference, and it's going to be harder and harder to catch up. So learn faster, operationalize faster, govern smarter, right? Don't sit still. And we'll see where this all goes. Many thanks again, Christophe. I really appreciate you joining us today and having some great predictions. And for all of you out there, if you found this useful, please subscribe to the Next Frontiers of AI. And we'll be back with our next episode very, very quickly, next couple of weeks or so. I'm Scott Hebner. This is the Next Frontiers of AI. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.